Since 1944, the US dollar has been king. It has stared down wars, recessions, oil shocks, political chaos, and even global financial meltdowns. For 80 years, it has been the bedrock of the world's economy. But what if I told you that for the first time since its reign began, the dollar is facing a perfect storm? A storm created by record-breaking global debt, nations quietly dumping their dollar reserves, central banks plotting a new digital future, and America itself facing its most fragile financial moment in modern history. According to emerging patterns, hidden documents, and major policy signals, the year 2026 is shaping up to be the moment everything changes. This is the story of how the world's most powerful currency reached its biggest test in 8 decades, and why 2026 could be the turning point no one is prepared for. To truly understand the danger ahead, we need to travel back to where it all began. The year is 1944. The place, Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The world is in ruins from war, and 44 nations gathered to rebuild it. But the United States came to the table with a secret weapon. 2/3 of all the world's gold was already sitting in American vaults. With that leverage, they struck a deal that created a financial empire. The Bretton Woods Agreement made the dollar as good as gold. Instead of hoarding heavy gold bars, countries could simply hold US dollars. Global trade, from oil to coffee, would be priced and paid for in dollars. For America, this was the ultimate privilege. It could finance wars, run massive deficits, and fuel its growth, all with money the rest of the world was hungry for. The dollar became the world's anchor of force that held the global economy together, but one that could also pull it all down if it ever started to crack. Fast forward to the late 1960s. The system was already showing signs of strain. America had been printing and spending so many dollars that it could no longer keep its original promise. Countries like France began to get nervous and started demanding their gold back in exchange for their dollar reserves. The problem was, the US didn't have enough gold to cover all the dollars it had printed. So, in 1971, President Nixon made a shocking announcement. He unilaterally severed the dollar's last link to gold. From that day on, the US dollar became something entirely new. A fiat currency, with no physical backing. Its value was based purely on trust in the US government. A financial asset that America could now print without any limit? Logically, the world should have panicked, but it didn't. In fact, something strange happened. The dollar became even more powerful. This new petrodollar system, where oil was priced in dollars, forced the world to need dollars more than ever before. But this new system also created a fatal flaw. The more dollars the world needed, the more debt America had to create to supply them. It was a ticking time bomb, and the fuse has been burning for 50 years. So why is 2026 the year everyone is watching? Because the patterns we're seeing today look dangerously familiar to past financial crises. Only this time, they're far more extreme. 3 massive forces are colliding at once. First, record global debt. The world is now drowning in over $300 trillion of debt. That's more than 3 times the size of the entire global economy. Many countries and even major corporations can only survive if the dollar remains strong and US interest rates stay low. But the exact opposite is happening. This brings us to the second force. Countries are quietly abandoning the dollar. This isn't something you'll see on the nightly news. They aren't making grand announcements. They're doing it quietly, systematically. Back in the year 2000, over 70% of the world's currency reserves were held in US dollars. Today, that number is closer to 55%, and it's falling fast. China and Russia are now conducting almost all of their trade without touching a single dollar. India is actively reducing its reserves. Major Middle Eastern oil producers are exploring deals priced in other currencies. Across Africa and Latin America, new currency blocks are forming to break away from dollar dependence. For the first time since 1944, real, viable alternatives are starting to emerge. And the third most critical force is a US fiscal crisis that's spiraling out of control. By 2025, America is projected to hit $36 trillion in national debt. For the first time in history, the interest payments on that debt will be larger than the entire defense budget. We're running these record deficits during a time of supposed economic expansion, something that should never happen. By 2026, the situation becomes even more dire. The US will need to borrow over $2 trillion every single year just to stay afloat. The interest on our debt will become the single largest government expense. America will face the highest debt refinancing burden in its entire history. For the first time, the dollar isn't just vulnerable from outside threats, it's critically vulnerable from the inside. This isn't just a random event. Historians have pointed to a recurring 80 to 100-year cycle for the world's reserve currencies. Think about it. In the 1760s, the British pound began its rise. By the 1840s, it was at its peak. And by the 1920s, after World War I, it collapsed as the world's dominant currency. Now look at the US dollar. 1944, it becomes king. And now, between 2024 and 2026, we are hitting that exact 8-year mark. Almost every reserve currency in history has faced its breaking point right around this timeline. The dollar is entering that window right now. But there's a new threat, a technological one that could accelerate everything. It's not China, it's not Russia, it's not the BRICS alliance. It might be a technology the US itself is helping to build, central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Right now, over 130 countries are actively developing a digital version of their own currency. The US, Europe, India, China, they are all in advanced stages. These digital currencies are a total game changer. They allow governments to track every single transaction in real time. They can remove commercial banks as the middlemen in our financial system. They could eventually replace physical cash entirely. Most importantly for this story, they could fundamentally change how nations settle trade with each other. If a new, efficient digital system for global trade emerges that doesn't rely on the old dollar infrastructure, the global demand for physical dollars could plummet almost overnight. And many of these countries are targeting 2026 for their initial rollout. So, what is the real test of 2026? It all comes down to one number: $9 trillion. That's how much US debt needs to be refinanced or rolled over in the year 2026 alone. America is trapped. If interest rates stay high to fight inflation, the cost of borrowing that $9 trillion becomes simply unaffordable. The federal budget could collapse, and foreign trust in our ability to pay our debts would break. But if the Federal Reserve is forced to lower rates to make that debt affordable, inflation could spike uncontrollably. The value of dollar reserves held by other countries would evaporate, causing them to flee the dollar even faster. Either path is incredibly dangerous. 2026 is the moment where all these forces come to a head. It's the moment the world will finally see whether the dollar can withstand the combined pressure of rising inflation, record global debt, falling trust, geopolitical realignment, and a revolutionary digital currency shift. The financial system we have today was built in 1944. It was designed for a post-war world of steamships and telegrams, not a world of AI and instant digital payments. For 80 years, the dollar has been the world's unshakable anchor. It's survived every crisis thrown at it. But today, the threat isn't external, it's structural. It's mathematical. 2026 won't necessarily be the end of the US dollar. It will still be a major currency. But it may very well be the year the world realizes the system created in 1944 cannot survive unchanged. It may be the end of the dollar as the one and only center of the financial universe. The world's most powerful currency is heading toward its biggest test in a lifetime. The only question is, will you be ready when it arrives? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world.